Apologize, everybody. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Let's stand for the pledge of the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, 1.03. May I have roll call, please?
Elizabeth Doberman.
Here.
Mary Lee Hall.
Here.
Samantha Hall. William Hall.
Here.
Jeremy Hash. Jennifer Henkel.
Here.
Nathan Henkel.
Here.
James Holly. Joseph Wilson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 2.01, procedure for public comments. I do believe we do not have public comment. Is that correct? Okay, no public comment. So that goes to 3, committee meeting agenda items. 3.01, data from school climate surveys. I will hand it over to you, Dr. Ruppert.
Thank you, Mrs. Henkel. Good evening, school board and community this evening. Dr. Hughes and I will be sharing and presenting the climate and culture survey data as a result of Pennsylvania Department of Education's survey. This is a survey that we had administered this past fall to our students, parents, as well as teachers. And we want to provide the board not only an update based on the results of that specific survey, but we do have survey data going back to 2018 that we wanted to share specific to the climate survey. So as we take a look at the PDE climate survey, this is developed for students from grades 4 through 12, but when we look specifically within our district, grades 4 through 6, which is our elementary, 7 through 8, which is our middle school, and 9 through 12. Typically, this survey is developed and generally issued every 2 years at the state level, but within our school district, we have utilized the PDE climate survey as a way to survey all 3 entities or stakeholders since 2018, because what it does is it provides us with consistency of the same survey instrument, same questions, and it will give us the ability over the years to take a look at longitudinal data as well as cohort data based on the responses. Specifically, when you take a look at the PDE climate survey, there are areas that are honed in on in specific questions, and Dr. Hughes and I will be speaking more specifically about that when we look at the parent, student, and the staff. But 3 of the areas that they focus on are student engagement in the areas of support, social emotional learning, respect, and a safe and respectful climate. And the one component I just want to reiterate is this survey is something that's produced by the state of Pennsylvania. We do not have the ability to modify or make changes to that. Therefore, when we go back to looking at 2018, which is the data we'll be sharing, we now have consistency of the survey instrument. So the question is, why measure school climate? I think the most important thing is we need to take a look at how are we improving with our climate within our schools, but more importantly, what can we do based on the results of the data to determine what are some of the next steps we need to do. The other part about this survey, these are perceptions. And Dr. Hughes will look, she has a specific, some questions that she'll be sharing, but it's perceptual data based on, do students feel safe in school? Do they feel supported in school, et cetera? So that perceptual data just gives us a way to really take a look at what's the tone, what's the emotional status of the school environment. And, it also states that perceptions, are easier to change and measure than, the culture. So if we know this is where our students, what they're thinking, what our staff are thinking, what our parents are thinking as a result of the questions, it gives us the ability at our school level teams to really take a look at what can we do to improve and change the overall functioning of the schools. So why is it important? Well, I think, something I've always said, if I know about it, I can do something about it. If we know things are going well, we can always say, what can we do better? If we know there are concerns that are occurring, what can we do to help make and change those perceptions? So this school climate really gives us a way to take a look at, how our students are learning and in what healthy ways, things are occurring, in their daily lives within the school. Focuses on the positiveness, the school connectedness. Students, we want to make sure feel connected to our schools. Our teachers, that they're having connectedness to our schools and to our students. And then our parents, their involvement. How involved are they, not only at the elementary, but also the middle and the high school, and trying to find out, what we can do each and every day to kind of improve in those areas. And then lastly, taking a look at how do people feel, our students feel in the classrooms, not only psychologically, but do they feel physically safe, valued, and respected on a daily basis. But please keep in mind, this is a survey that previous years we've done once a year, which we typically did at the end of the year, but based on discussion with the board last school year, we decided we were going to do one in the fall, and then we'll also have one ready to send out in May that'll go to all 3 stakeholder groups. So we'll have some comparative data specifically for the 2024-2025 school year. As I mentioned, there are 3 specific areas that are identified in the survey. Student support, so it's taking a look at how students feel they're being listened to, being cared for, being cared about. Are they being helped by teachers? And not just the teachers, the other adults in the school. So it goes beyond. So we have paraprofessionals, you have office and clerical staff, the custodians, the cafeteria workers. It goes beyond, just teachers when you're looking at how they're feeling supported. And then regarding the social emotional learning, their perceptions of their peers' social and problem-solving skills. How are students moving through challenges that they're faced with, and then how are they addressing those and solving them? And then lastly, the safe and respectful climate. I think that is one of the most important pieces. How are we creating a place where students feel physically safe, but also emotionally safe within our schools? And we know that there are situations that occur that students may not feel that level of safety. And I think that's where our building level teams, our administrators, our teachers, continue to work and focusing on how to create that positive environment and address the concerns that may come up so we can create a more safe and healthy environment.
So we wanted to start out by giving you a sample of what the actual survey looks like. So the survey is in a Likert scale. You'll see down at the bottom where you see questions A through F. And it says strongly agree, disagree, agree, strongly agree. So it is a Likert scale that our different stakeholder groups go through, and they select where they fall on those questions. We're going to dig into the questions a little bit tonight and really look at the data. We wanted to focus in on 2024 this fall, but then also to show you the data from over a time span looking at 2018 to current. One of the things to take note of is that the survey was sent out in October of 24. So when we look at the fall data, it's from October of 24. The first thing that we wanted to look at is that we had 495 elementary students in grades 4 through 6 take the survey. We wanted to make sure, as Dr. Ruppert stated though, there are 3 different categories of questions on there. So we wanted to look at the survey and kind of see where did those questions break down. So we had 43 total questions for the survey. 20 of those questions were in social emotional. Student support were 3 questions, and safe school climate were 20 questions. I note that because 3 questions, we cannot change the design of those questions. They were put out from PDE. So we wanted to just make sure, because when you look at our scores, overall, we had a 3.09. We know 3.4 is our area of agreement where we're targeting. 3.09 was our average score. In the social emotional area, we were at 3.32, which was much higher than our overall score. Student support average was at 3.07. Once again, 3 questions there. But then safe school climate average, we're at 2.89. When we look at a contradiction, it's 2.5. we are not happy with that score. We have to continue to look and see what are we doing to raise our students' understanding of safe, supportive school environment and the climate. But I wanted to give you an example of what some of those questions look like. So looking at a social emotional question that was for our students, I get along well with others. Our students were at a 3.4, which is in agreement. We like that information because it means that they look at their classmates. And usually at the elementary level, it's for those students that are in their immediate class. Student support, once again, there are very few questions on there, but one of them was, my teachers really care about me. Once again, a 3.47. We're very proud of our relationships that our teachers have with our students. And then when we look at safe school climate, this is one that was interesting to me when I looked at it. It said, the question was, students bully one another at a 2.81. For me, I want it to be lower because we want a contradiction to that question. We don't want our students to feel that there's bullying going on in the school. And then student support, I'm bored in school, was at a 2.42. I want a lower score for that because I want students to feel challenged. I don't want them to feel bored in class. So when we look at this, we have to really go through and pull out those questions when we look at the survey. As a team, we want to sit down and really go through and say, okay, so if kids are not feeling bored, that's good, but how do we continue to challenge them? What groups of kids are feeling, if we have any that are feeling bored? What are we doing to challenge those kids in the classroom with their curriculum? So as we go through, the next piece of information, we wanted to look at it from a longitudinal area. So when you look at our scores, looking at 2018, I feel that this is very important information because we have pre-COVID, then we have the winter directly following COVID. And I want to note, we had 572 respondents. We have gone down a little bit in the winter of 21, the 451, then back up a little bit to 508, 457, and 494. So our totals, we expect for our number of respondents to go down because we know our class sizes are getting a little smaller over the next couple of years, but we want to make sure that we're getting every student grades 4 through 6 to take the survey so that we know. The other piece that I wanted to note on here is that when you look, our scores in winter of 2021 were much higher than they were in the other years. And one of the things that we've been discussing as a group is the fact that many of our students were very happy to be back in school and really hoping that we continue to work through the gaps that we saw from being out with COVID. So we look at this data to really see, we want to get back and make sure that our areas are agreeable at 3.4. That's our goal, to be above that. We don't even want 3.4, we want above. But we also identified as we were going through this that we want to make sure this data point, as Dr. Ruppert stated, is happening in the fall, and then we'll be doing again in the spring. We also identify, though, we need more data points. So that's where, as we're giving to you every month the HRS data from level 1, that's where we're continuing to pull monthly different data sources to make sure that we have the systems in place. So we'll move on now to look at our middle school data.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. And a very similar setup. There's 41 questions, but there's a different breakdown. Social emotional is 19 questions, student support at 17, and safe school climate at 5. And when you take a look at the averages, you know, when we look, if you look comparable to the elementary, the middle school averages are lower, you know, with the overall of 2.75. The SEL, social emotional learning at 2.57, and the student support at 2.75, and then the safe school climate average at 2.91. And, you know, one thing I did want to point out, you know, when we do take a look at the data, when students get into the middle school, you have another transition. They're going from potentially 6, maybe 7 years if they're with us from kindergarten into a 2-year building. But then please put in mind, you know, some of the challenges that middle schoolers are dealing with. social, emotionally, physically, those challenges that are created, as a result of that growth, does impact our students when they get to the middle school level. So, some of the questions that Dr. Hughes and I decided to specifically pull out, which are some are similar to the elementary, where teachers in the school really care about me. So you're looking at 3.03, so it's not at the total agreement of 3.4, but the overall perception of the students that participated is that they felt supported. Students give up when they can't solve a problem easily. I think this is another one where we don't want students to give up. We want our students to put forth the best. So when we're saying that the students aren't giving up easily, it gives us the ability to really take a look at, what additional things do we need to provide to our students, whether it's, grit, whether it's support, perseverance, to work through some of the challenging things they're dealing with, not only academically, but socially as well as behaviorally. Safe school climate. Students at the schools are often bullied. I'll go back to Dr. Hughes, where it's a contradiction, which is a good thing, because if students were in agreement that this school students are often bullied, and you're closer to a 3.0 or a 4 or 3.4, then you're looking holistically that the majority of the students are believing that they are being bullied at the middle school. So when you look at the 2.69, that's something, it's still showing that students are reporting that there is bullying occurring, but it's at the lower level, which is where, as the administrative team, when we looked at this data, it still gives us something that we can continue to focus on. And under social emotional, another one was students do their best even when the work is difficult. I think that's another area, as students move through and the rigor in the courses does increase, we want our students to continue to do their best even when they're difficult. So taking a look at the longitudinal data for the middle school, going back to 2018, the one area when I was talking with Dr. Hughes that really, stuck out to me, taking a look at it, first of all, was the student participation rate. We have put measures into place that, we're having our students participate in taking this during the school day. It could be during a specific class. It could be, I would say, maybe a health class at the middle school level. It could be a social studies class at the high school. Elementary could be during a morning meeting. So we have put in place provisions where these would occur for our students so we can increase the number of participants. But also going back to the first comment that I mentioned when I opened up about the middle school, about the lowest area in social emotional learning, just knowing that, students as they're coming into the middle school, that transition, the things that they're dealing with physically, biologically, socially, emotionally, et cetera, that area is low. And, we have to continue to look at what other provisions, what other supports we can put into place for our students that as they come into the middle school, there's more of that connectedness, there's more of that involvement, and more of the ability that they feel connected to everything, not only inside the school during your curricular, but also the extracurricular opportunities that we have offered for our students.
Next, looking at our high school, we had 41 questions and we had 680 students to respond, which we were very happy about the 680 because in our high school, a lot of our students come in for certain classes and they leave, and it's a voluntary survey. We give this to the students and they have the option of not taking it. We tried to have students take this, and a lot of our teachers have really good connections with students that they kind of prompt them and get them to take the surveys that we give. But just once again, looking, you'll see that the breakdown of the questions are much more in alignment than what the other survey at the elementary and the middle school was. So looking at 11 questions, social emotional, 17 student support, and then safe school climate, 13. Our average score was a 2.71 with a 2.45 at the emotional average, social emotional. student support at the 2.73, and safe schools at a 2.89. We are not pleased with this. We want to continue to look and work on how do we engage our students and make them feel high school is a place where they want to be, that they feel engaged, that they feel a part of the school environment. Some of the questions that we looked at to find out like what were the questions students were answered, very similar to the other levels. Students are often bullied at school. You'll see the number is a little higher, but still not at the 3.4 level. School climate, students treat others with respect at a 2.73. Student support, teachers really care about me at a 3.01, and then I'm usually bored in class at a 2.15. One of the things that I take away from this is that we do not have students treating each other all the time with respect. And that's something that we have to continue to work through, that we want our students to feel that we are a united front and that they're all here for a common purpose. Part of when I looked at the data from 2018 to 2024, once again, you'll see that our averages are pretty close. We have always struggled in the social emotional learning area. So that's an area that we have to continue to look at. You'll see that our safe schools were actually higher than it's been in the past. And you'll see that so was our student support, with the only caveat to that being that winter 21 when students came back. We want to try to get that feeling again where students felt happy and wanted to be back in school. That's where we're striving. We want to continue to bring our students to an educational environment. Part of that is also looking, for example, the question that talked about being bored. What programs are we offering our students? Are we giving them more options to be able to do more hands-on types of activities, like our drone courses and those types of things?
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. So moving into the second component of the survey is the staff data. So this is another component. When we look at sample questions, there will be a specific question that would be geared to a student, but then the staff may have a similar question, so then we can take a look as an administrative team where the comparisons are and the responses based on them. So for the staff, it's 43 questions. The district average score, as we're looking at the staff survey, was a 3.13, for social emotional, 2.71. Staff's perception, with providing student support, very high of a 3.31, and then the safe school climate average of a 3.28. But as we take a look at some of the specific questions is, one of them that the school provides a welcoming environment at a 3.43. And that welcoming environment goes beyond what the teachers doing, because we're talking staff. So this includes all stakeholders that are working within the school. So it could be our cafeteria, it could be our maintenance, it could be our custodians. Everybody is part of making that school a welcoming environment. Students treat each other with respect at 2.89. That's a perception where, our teachers are believing that it may not be occurring as often as it should be. So that's an area that we need to continue to focus on in how do we, promote those positive opportunities, positive learning environment for their students. And then student supports, where the schools make a steady progress for implementing rigorous academic standards at a 3.30. As a school board, each and every month we do have our curriculum maps that are coming to you for approval, which is really taking us to focus on specifically what our students are learning and how we're creating opportunities for them to be career and college ready. And then finally, from the student supports, I really care about my students, 3.82. I would expect that to be even higher, but we're in this business to work with students, and it doesn't surprise me that that is where it is. But we know that our teachers really care, our administrators really care, anyone who works with our students really care about those students in the classroom. So to take a look specifically now at elementary and I'll do an elementary, middle, and high school breakdown of the elementary data. Some of the areas that you take a look at where in the elementary level that really have kind of popped out, so to speak, would be in the areas of that student support. You know, where the teacher's perception is that there's a lot of support for our students, not only for the academic, but any other needs that they would have within the school. And then the safety part, you know, at a 3.34 for this last one in the fall. But then we look at social emotional learning, the average at a 2.84. You know, we know that students are coming in with, you know, challenges that they're being faced with, and continually to take a look at what are the current supports that we have available and resources for our students, but more importantly, what else do we need to do to make sure that everyone feels connected within our schools. The other part that I do want to make note of, which Dr. Hughes and I did about the respondents, is we've provided for our staff the opportunity that these are being done during faculty meetings or during department meetings. So we're setting up time that these are being done as a whole. They're being done individually, but we're creating the opportunity so they get done, so we have the ability, because the more data we have, the more reliable it is based on the results. Looking at the middle school, which is very synonymous with our student middle school data, when we look at the social emotional learning part, areas in a contradictory area, because we noted that with our students that there were some areas where, you know, we know there still needed to be an area of focus. So when you're looking specifically at the middle school, that is an area that, you know, we are continuing to focus on, not only over the last few years, but you know, if you go back even a few years when I was the principal at Southern Middle School, that was an area that we continued to focus on in helping our students be part of, you know, the whole, whether it's through curricular or extracurricular clubs. And the other part I want to point out is you can see our respondents have gone up, and that's as a result of the expectation of when we're administering that and providing the structures in place for it. And then finally, as we're taking a look at the high school, a couple that I did want to point out for this past year is that student support average at a 3.39. We know a lot of our students are excelling at the high school level, not only academically but extracurricularly. When you have students taking, you know, the AP classes, dual enrollment classes for the upperclassmen, you know, the students have that support when you're looking at that academic piece. And then also looking at that safe school, the climate average, is we see that our students have that perception that we do have a safe school at Susquehannock, and you know, we'll continue to focus on some of the areas that we could do to continually take a look at that social emotional learning, which is consistent from our elementary, middle, and high school when we're looking at the staff part of the survey, that we need to continue to, you know, look at all those necessary supports. And then once again, you know, our respondent level has crept up, not as high as it was in the spring of 2022, but the thing that we're really looking at is the more respondents we have, like I said, the more reliable it is. And I'll turn over the last part to Dr. Hughes, and she'll speak specifically about the parent data.
So our parent data was for a total of 14 questions. We had 243 total participants, 159 from the elementary, 32 from the middle school, and 52 from the high school. Once again, as Dr. Roberts stated, we need people to fill out the surveys so that we get an accurate understanding. We're putting out a plea. We're going to be having several surveys coming up in the next couple of months. We're asking that every parent take the time. In this survey, there are 14 questions. It should take you less than 10 minutes. We're looking for other ways also. For example, when you're going through the carpool line for other surveys that we have, to try to get more parents that gives just a real quick response, trying to look at creating more surveys that are less in number but done maybe more frequently. So one of the things we're once again putting a plea out, please, please, please complete our surveys for us because we need more information to make sure we're having an accurate count. So our average score for our parents of 243 for our district was at a 3.3. Some of the examples, so of the 14 questions, here's 4 of them. My child's school is supportive and an inviting place for students at a 3.37. My child feels safe at school at a 3.30. My child is getting a good education at the school at a 3.37, and my child likes his or her teachers at a 3.5. So as you look, they are very close to the 3.4 agreement line. And one of the things that we're seeing over and over are that we have children who love being with their teachers. And that's something that we pride ourselves very much on, and we thank our teachers for the day in and day out hard work that they do. And that they are coming in every day, they love our children, and they want the best for our kids. Just like we thank our parents for being that collaborative support system with us. If you look at our parent data, you'll see that our traditionally our numbers have been lower at 199, then right after COVID, and then next year at 407 and 376, and then 168 and 159. We're asking, please help us make that number back as high as we can possibly get it. Sorry. Great.
We'll wait.
So as we're going through, if you go back 2 slides, Greg, thank you. There you go. One more, middle school. My clicker got away from me. So as you look at our middle school scores, once again, 32 parents responded. And we had 150 in 2021. And then finally, our high school parent respondents, we were at 52. So that's where we're really putting out the plea and wanted to make sure that everybody knows, please, 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 fill out those surveys.
And as Dr. Hughes said, you're looking at 14 questions. So any parents that are out here that are viewing this evening or watch it on, a replay, is when that survey comes out in the spring, which we're in spring, but it comes out in May, please take a moment to complete that survey. Your feedback is valuable, and it will give us the opportunity to really take a true reflection of where your perception is based in those areas, and then we can utilize the parent data with the student and the staff data to really determine what type of modifications we may need to make within our programming during schools, and then what our offers or things we may need to do to provide extracurricular opportunities if that may be something that is identified. So the last thing we wanted to kind of close up with, as Dr. Hughes opened in her part, is that monthly we have been providing the board directors a monthly update on each of the components of Level 1 of Marzano, of Safe, Supportive, and Collaborative Culture. Though this survey is generally done once a year, but this year for PDE we're doing it twice, that data that we're collecting through high reliability schools is on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that's occurring. So it's given us an opportunity to kind of see things on a more regular basis, but a collection of that data, through the classrooms, sample questions you might ask, walking the walls, seeing what's in the hallways, talking to parents, talking to students, whereas a random perceptual survey that comes out is only once or twice a year. So as Dr. Hughes said, our goal is to continue to use multiple data sources. Beginning of the school year, Dr. Hughes and I presented the PACE survey, which had specific information about safety and support at school. So this is now giving the board, 3 different components of data relating to how things are functioning within our school. So, our goal is to continue to provide that data to you. Our goal is to maintain our status in Level 1, but we know that there are certain situations that may occur that we may have to focus more attention to safety, or more attention to support in school, or more attention to the social emotional learning of the individuals that are not only the staff, the students, or the parents. But we do appreciate any and all feedback, and I'll end it the way we started. If we know about it, we can do something about it. And the one way is through data and through the numbers that we can really then take a look at specifically what are the areas to focus on, but then what are the areas that we're doing well in. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the rest of the board to ask Dr. Ruppert and Dr. Hughes some questions. I'll go ahead and kickstart one for myself. Do you guys have the ability to analyze the data from a building perspective for the elementary schools?
Yes, we do have the building level data is broken down by the elementary schools. For each of the board directors, we did provide that data to you in your board director drive. For all intents and purposes with this evening's presentation, our goal was to set it up similar to when we did our pay survey. So then we're looking at the band, so we got the elementary band, the middle school band, and then the high school band. So the board directors, you do have a Google Sheet that is broken down by each individual school, parent, student, and staff.
And then off the top of your head, and if you don't remember, that is absolutely fine, because it's a lot of data. Did you, just for the general public's purposes, see any real difference between each building in elementary school, or were the averages about the same for each?
They were about the same, so we weren't seeing any major outliers or anything along those lines.
Okay.
One of the other pieces is that while we can get individual schools, it does not go down to the classroom level.
Okay. And then when we turn to middle school, if I can have everybody go ahead and turn to that for a second.
The student?
Yeah, students. I just want to make sure that I'm digesting and contending with this information correctly. So when we look at the sample questions, the first one for social emotional, it's students give up when they can't solve a problem easily. Now, obviously, we want that score to be low. And it barely passed muster for a contradiction, right?
Right.
Which is what you guys were highlighting. And then the last question for social emotional would be students do their best even when their schoolwork is difficult. That's 2.7. We're almost entering contradiction, and you want that to be high. And I guess what I would point to, there are obviously things in this survey that speak to what the school can do better, what the school's responsibility is. Those two questions, as I see them, are largely a parent attitudes where the parent is the predominant influence. And so I really do sympathize with a school district for being the ones responsible for an attitude a student comes in. And when you cross-reference that data point, those two specifically, with where it really is the parents that are responsible for the students' attitudes, with parents and their interaction with the survey, I mean, I had written it down. What is the middle school data parents' response?
32.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and point there. That's really disconcerting. And I know, with, we have a little bit more control is not the word I want to use, but I'll use it, control with what happens in the building. We can offer the surveys to students. We can offer the surveys to the teachers. With parents, if they want to know what's happening with their children, they need to have more conversations with their children. And so I really do just want to highlight the tension of a district going out of their way to try to improve things the best that they can with the responses that they have. Like Dr. Ruppert said, if we don't have the data, how can we change? How can we? And so, yeah, that's how I see things. Does anybody else have any other highlights they'd like to?
I have a few clarifying questions about the responses. I don't think this is anywhere in the presentation. What is the numeric range for the responses? Is it 0 to 4 or 1 to 5?
It's up to 4.
Up through 4.
Is it 1 to 4 or 0 to 4? Like what's
1 to
the
4.
lowest?
1 to
score?
4.
It's 1 to 4. Okay, so the lowest score they can give a 1, 2, 3, or 4 to any question, basically, the respondents. Are there, I assume there are some sort of descriptors given to 1, 2, 3, and 4? Is it something like strongly agree?
So they do. They have agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree.
Okay.
And one of the things that we learned from doing the HRS survey is that with the Likert scale, they gave a numerical order. I don't know what the state has assigned to each one of them, but they give like a numerical order to be able to come up with the averages.
Okay. So yeah, I think that gets my, so it's 1 to 4, it goes from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and then I think my next question was gonna be, let me make sure this is what you were answering. With some questions being good, where high scores are good for some questions, but high scores are bad for others, you're not privy to the way that they actually
Score.
do the calculation
No.
there.
Yeah.
Whether they just invert it. I mean, inverting it wouldn't make sense if you.
Right.
Is the 2.5 and 3.4 something we came up with, or it's, no, that's.
Yeah, the state had come up with that as thresholds, just
Okay.
based on lots of data points. And if you're looking at areas of agreement, they came up with, and I don't want to say an arbitrary, but like a 3.4. That's closer to the 4, as well as when you're looking at the 2.5 or the contradictory. It's lower, it's not at a 1, but it's like 1.5 from it.
I think the other piece, though, is that to this is that the power of this comes down by taking and looking at each question and kind of discussing and saying, so where are our kids falling on this, or where are our parents? What do we need to do? And one of the things that we've been really strongly looking at with HRS is that HRS doesn't mean that we have everything in place and it's always going wonderfully. What it is it's a system put in place to say, wait a minute, your data is not showing you that you still have this where you need it to be. So we're able to quickly then try to get on board of saying, here's our plan then on how we're gonna fix this. So I think that's the difference as we're looking at these, is that we're looking at data and things in a new light and really looking and saying, what can we do to fix this piece, and how are we going to make sure that we're getting information to say, yes, we're getting this here. And I think that's the other piece. One of the other conversations we've been having is that with HRS, we have a lot of structures in place. We have so many different pieces that we've put in place that we can't tell everyone every single one of them. But we know that we've got structures in place that as soon as something happens, our admin team and our teachers are working through these pieces, and that we're able to give information as we can to help our whether it's a math score, what plan do we have, or whether it's this piece. It's those processes that are putting in place to help us make sure that we're on top of them.
My question on this is, especially student data, as we go from elementary, middle to high school, do we get the demographic information so you can tell male, female?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Is there,
Great.
what sort of gaps are we seeing there? Is it a,
yeah, right now, that's the only description that we can take a look at. Demographic is male, female. And when we take a look at the specific data, as Dr. Hughes said, we're at the building level, we could break down those specific questions and really take a look at, okay, when it's looking at, I'll use the bully as an example, okay? You know, you're going to see probably a higher, you would see a higher percentage where individuals, the boys may feel the bullying is occurring, as where the girls are not seeing that. Where you're looking at the work ethic in the classroom, you might see the opposite, where, you know, the girls are saying there's, you know, more focused on school, whereas the boys is not to that level. And I think developmental or age, when you go through elementary to middle to high school, that changes, because when you get to the high school level, you know, it depends on one who's taking the survey. And, you know, we look at, you know, the number of students from the high school this past year, I believe it was 680 students. You know, we have students that are involved in a lot of activities. We've got students that are doing very well academically. So when you look there, Joe, you'd be looking at probably more of a push based on some of the questions, based on the academic performance and the support of the support of their staff, of each other in the classroom.
Yeah, I'm just reacting to the high school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually bored in class.
You can
Is
also
there-
break it down by grade level.
Okay.
And I also want to point out, once again, this was given in October. We also have to be careful of the times that we're giving surveys. One of the things that we know is like May tends to be everything's going on. Parents, that's why we're once again pleading, please fill these out. But we know graduation's coming up. We know people's lives become very busy with spring activities and all those types of things. So we're trying to balance, these pieces and finding the best time when you're coming off of a long stretch where we haven't had many breaks. Our kids tend to have a little bit more, maybe not as happy about things that are going in school when we've gone a long area. So I think those are also other pieces that we try to take into consideration, and we bring in multiple data points to be able to look at that.
So, Joe, you identified the high school. I am usually bored in class, and it's contradictory. It's a 2.15. So the point is, that's good.
Want it
Yes.
lower.
Because you're actually inverting
Right.
and
Right.
saying, no,
Yep.
I'm not really
Yep.
that bored.
Yeah.
So that's
No,
what,
I mean,
and I
I
think
just-
Nathan has a really
Yeah.
good question, which I was thinking about as well. I wonder how, when they do an overall average, how do they connect the contradictory to
Yes,
the-
and
Trust.
Can you invert it? I'm not sure
Yeah.
the
It
math
doesn't,
Yeah.
behind
it
that
doesn't
one,
work
but
if you
yeah.
just,
Yeah.
is strictly.
But that all
Or if they
happens
give
on
it
an
a-
internal level,
Yeah.
right?
Right,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think, and Jen, I point taken with getting parent involvement, and I think one of our challenges, probably in any school system, but us working with staff, it's like when the HRS teams are together, it's we control what we control. So let's talk about what we can do, right? Obviously. And for that particular area, most of us are in education, our mindset goes to growth mindset. So for social emotional, it's not, so if you're struggling with something, you don't have it yet. And that's a game changer. That one little word is you don't have it versus you don't have it yet, but we're going to get there. And that's that, if a student is with us for 12 years, we want them by the time they get to the high school to be thinking in that terminology, because it's something that does take time to change or even develop, but appreciate the feedback.
With the board deciding not to pursue the panorama surveys, and with your idea to go ahead and have the PDE climate surveys twice a year, do you still feel that this meets the data requirements that we have, that it's broaching the all-encompassing things that we need to know?
She says she wants to answer, so I'm going to
Go
step
for
back.
it. Step in.
one of the things that, and I hate to keep going back to HRS, but it's one of the practices that we put in place. We're getting data all the time. And I think that's the power behind it, is that we're not waiting for 2 surveys. So those questions that have been like on a panorama are what we're asking parents when they're coming in and dropping kids off, or when we have, something going on in the school and we ask the kids real quick 2 questions. Or we have a custodian in the hallway that may ask 2 kids every lunch period about something. We're doing it in different ways so that we're getting lots of different students. It's not just the student or the parent who will fill it out. We're trying to find ways, like at back-to-school events or at sport events, to be able to say, hey, can you answer this quick question? That's different than what we've ever done before. So I think those are the pieces. Certification requires us, as we go through each level, requires us to continue to get that information for each level. So one of the things we'll be putting out in March, or in April, I think it is.
Yeah, April.
Our level 3 survey will be coming out. But I think those are the power behind it, is that we're getting data and we're being transparent with it. We're giving it out monthly. we're continuing to have those practices. Next year, we'll be reporting on level 1 and level 2 to the board, and we'll be collecting the data for level 3, and then we'll be doing that. So I think that's where we're kind of seeing Panorama kind of went away, but we have other structures in place that are kind of taking its place between this and that HRS data.
I love hearing that because to have it be a more organic way of questioning, surveys and data are only going to be as important as the people who respond, and you're able to gather respondents that we wouldn't maybe normally get through this kind of survey. So yeah, I love hearing that. Does anybody else have any other?
Yeah, I have a question. So, it appears that in pretty much every sector except for the students in elementary, but I think more interestingly, the staff data across really all grades, the lowest scores are in the social and emotional learning area. Do we have an idea of what is driving that? Because obviously for students, they may not understand all of the implications of this type of a survey, but certainly the teachers do. And to have that be consistent, sort of across all of the schools, there must be something there that's driving that.
Well, and Kim might have something else that she might want to share with us, but we look at that social emotional piece, our staff are educated specific in these areas, whether it's, programs that they're doing at the elementary, middle, or the high school that they're focusing on. How do we build our students to, when we're talking about building the warrior, how are we creating, our students to have the character traits that we believe they need to be successful, to be career and college ready? So from a staff perspective, they see, like Dr. Bryson said, they see where our students can reach their potential, but they're not there yet. Whereas our students, they may be looking at more at, the microcosm of specific things that are going on in their world right now and not understanding where things are. So when you have students, you look at developmentally, if you look at elementary, just by looking at that specific data, our elementary staff, when you look at that social emotional piece, is higher than it is at the middle school and the high school level. So, you look at the involvement of the students at the elementary, in most cases, they're in one classroom, kindergarten, first, second, they got that home feeling, they get that small classroom feeling, and they're able to kind of work through things in that little family setting. Now you get to the middle school and you go to the high school, as I talked about the developmental changes that are occurring when you get that student getting into the middle school level, and then their involvement, extracurricularly when they get to the high school, you may take a look at the students, the perception of the teachers is that the students aren't equipped with those skills yet, therefore you see the results of the data as a decrease as the students are getting older and there's more, there's more responsibility, freedoms and responsibility that our students have as they move up.
I think it's also teaching routines and helping our students see, one of the things I know that we've been talking about as a district is teaching those soft skills or employability skills and making sure that that is a part of what we have in our curriculum. And I think our teachers sometimes see when you have students that are not able to control themselves, maybe like in the hallways as easily or those types of things, or they hear some of the comments that are going back and forth. That's one of the things we're doing right now with Building the Warrior. Across all of the schools, we have safe, responsible, respectful, resilient. Those are the 4 main components that we want every student to have information on to help build that character and build those pieces. It's something that as we continue to move forward and develop those lessons and build those pieces, that we have to continue to, teach those soft skills and make sure that they know how do you, it was interesting, I just did a curriculum today for business, and one of the things that was in there was looking at those soft skills of how do you get along with your work environment? How do you get along with different leadership styles in your organization? And teaching kids, what do you do when you're working in a group? What do you do when you are, those are all components that we have to continue to work through. And I'm not sure if we're there yet. We're continuing to build that.
Bill, I think it's a great question. I think nationally, you'd see that same trend or state averages. And I was thinking, we used to have state averages. I don't know if they still do them for overall categories. It's something we could take a look
Yeah.
at to bring
See, I didn't
perspective to
remember
that.
seeing it.
But I think for general, if you're comparing it amongst those other domains and why that's the lowest, quite honestly, it's the hardest to develop and assess over time, in that I can teach a student how to add, but teaching them how to be kind takes much more time, energy, effort, and it's got to be integrated in everything to continue to develop that. It's a partnership between home and us that we're on the same page with those characteristics that we're trying to improve. And why? Because they carry over to your job. And if you're struggling with some of those areas, so I think, and as a teacher, if I've got 25 kids, some days these two aren't getting along. And then the next day, those two, just like my kids at home, don't always get along. But to a teacher, you're seeing that on a daily basis. You're probably having some kind of conflict between kids, because you're dealing with so many more. And I think you're going to see a better score at the elementary, as Dr. Ruppert indicated. You've got a classroom that you create a family with and you're with all day long. You can really make a difference in how kids treat each other and how they get along, and teach them strategies to improve upon that. Whereas we get to the middle school, now we're shifting every 45, 50 minutes, thus emphasizing the importance of the team model at a middle school, where at least we keep them on the same team. But eventually you get to the high school, and now I could be all over in 7 different classrooms with 7 totally different groups of kids. And we really test how good they are with those skills.
So if I'm hearing that clearly, you're saying it's really the teacher's presentation of how the students are getting along and the students' behavior. That's what the teachers are basing their answers on.
Well, I mean, it depends on the specific question. When you actually break it down by questions in that category, you'll see there are differences even within that. So they might score high with kids getting along, but low when kids are struggling, they give up. And so they're both in social emotional learning.
Sure.
But in one particular area, they may be far better than
Which
what's
was
perceived in others.
Sort of the basis of my question is there a specific driver? Because it appears to be across the entire district. It's in every building, so, and all of the staff are, and in some cases, the staff respondent is gone up. It looks encouraging, the staff's responding to it looks encouraging. So if there is a consistency in there, being that that's our lowest performing area, if there is a consistency in there and it's consistent across the district, that would be really valuable to understand.
Yeah, and to Bill's point, I see exactly what you're talking about. When you look at the staff input, you can tell that when it comes to the other elements of it, they're the professionals in the building, and they were still able to respond based on what they saw, anticipation of knowing what the perfect score would be, and working on things, they were able to respond in kind with that, but those scores are still consistently low. And it would appear that it's not just because they're the ones that know what it should be.
Right,
That
right.
it's, that
Absolutely.
it's low because it's low.
But then it's exact same, if you
All
go
the way
back into
through.
high school and middle school, the only place that is somewhat contradictory would be the elementary school.
Yeah, and-
Where it's not the, lowest performing area.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if there is a common thread, and I'm sure the questions are somewhat designed to reveal those threads. like you said, whether it's a question about, students
Right.
being able to understand their work and not give up, or versus, students' interaction with one another. I mean, they're clearly two different directions in the line of questioning.
In the document that you're putting in the drive for the board directors, does that have all the questions with their scores?
I believe
think
so. I will double check that. I know we did do a breakdown of every one of the schools
Yeah.
with that. So let me just double check the breakdown. Oh, yes.
Yeah, so it does? Okay.
Yes.
It has the
Well,
graphs.
when we updated the information for Mr. Templeton, those questions were all dropped in to the drive. If I could specifically speak for that time, I'll have to double check, but they would have been the same data set that was put in there.
So we'll be able to look at 11 questions for the staff, social, emotional, and see for each one the average score. Yeah, okay, great. I think that'll help with what you're asking.
Does anybody else have any other comments or questions?
Oh, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that presentation and for answering questions. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Alrighty, that brings us to 3.02. Does anybody else have any other items of business?
I'm just going to announce that we had an executive session on March 12th for legal counsel. That's it.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Brings us to 5.01. I move to adjourn this meeting. May I have a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any nays or abstentions? That motion carries.